Hi, my name is Hamza Azhar Salam and you're watching the Pakistan Daily. Today we're with Miss Mishayl Hussain, who's a doctor by day, has worked in the fashion industry, and hosts the Good Girl podcast. Thank you, Mishayl, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. So, what did we want to speak about?
So, Mishayl, tell me first, how is it different being a girl in Pakistan compared to a guy?
So I realize that this is like a very very vague question, and like anyone else, or I don't think I can speak for everyone else here, but I came from London and I lived here almost 6 years now in a hostel of my hospital, and there's a girls' hostel and there's a boys' hostel, and they're both side by side, both guarded by guards. The whole community is very well guarded. But I remember that when I was in first year, there were so many things that used to frustrate me because we couldn't even do simple things like order food past 10 p.m. Like if our delivery guy came by 10 p.m. or past 10 p.m., we were not allowed to actually collect our dinner. It was all very set, whereas the guys never had to actually worry about when they would be getting their food or when they would not be getting food. For us, we had to manage all the work that we had to do for the week on 3 days of the week, which was Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Those were the only days that we were actually allowed to go out. And we had to be back by 9 p.m. And there was a whole process where you would have to sign a register to leave, give a card, and then come back and then recollect that card and then, sign in again. Whereas the guys could just leave and come back whenever they pleased, and there was no one to even ask them. I think their hostel didn't even have a warden. Other than that, I feel like I always had to face, and still do face in my house job, things like uniform issues, where me wearing the exact same thing, which is a hospital scrubs, would get me into trouble, whereas, the guys could be wearing bathroom slippers with their hospital scrubs and no one would bat an eyelid. So I think even though these things are really petty, and I don't think that they should be actually such a cause of such stress in your life, but once you start getting hounded by your administration for dressing a certain way, which is basically the same, or trying to do normal things like go to the bank, but you can't because it's not a Wednesday, then it starts to affect you because you're just like, okay, you know what, just to do something that someone else doesn't even require thinking in, I have to plan so much. So when do I get to do things that are actually more than just the basic?
Do you think boys have it better in Pakistan?
I don't know if they have it better. I think they have it easier. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could say in which they don't have it easier. I could definitely bring up family systems in which the guys definitely are disadvantaged because they have to carry a name forward, and under that immense pressure they end up being in loveless marriages and loveless families and not actually being in careers that they would rather have. So I don't think that everyone has it has it better, but I definitely think that there's a lot of basic things in which definitely, of course, they have it easier because they could go take a walk at night or be with their friends or drive around and do whatever they please, whereas we can't do simple things. But I think it would also be wrong to say that this is only in Pakistan. I feel like nowadays, generally, the environment of the world has become such that women can't really walk alone at night anywhere. I don't think it's safe anywhere to do that, and that's the problem.
But Mishayl, you've lived in London, you've lived in Prague, and now you're working in Lahore. So if you compare the three cities in which you've lived in, which city do you think gives the most freedom to women?
I think freedom is something that we need to define for ourselves. I'm someone who's always run after freedom, you could say, or is very attracted to it, and I think a lot of Pakistani girls would resonate with the fact that they go abroad looking for freedom, right? They don't really know what that is. It's imaginary. They don't know what they're really looking for when they're going. But I did live in all three cities, but I don't think, maybe I was a little rebellious even for Pakistan because I feel like I live here just the same, actually. I feel like I travel alone just the same as I did in London. I feel like for sure, I don't think I could, go into a crowded, dense, old Lahore area wearing Western clothing.
But why is that? Let's talk about that for a moment. Why would you feel uncomfortable?
Well, I would have. So the thing is, like, this is something that we need to. Yeah, this is something that probably does need to be looked into detail. I think, yeah, I wouldn't do it because you get stared at a lot, and you get catcalled, or people start following you, or sometimes you can't just enjoy a normal meal without like someone, or like going to a restaurant, or you couldn't do anything. You couldn't walk around in those areas or shop, or like if you go to Liberty, I don't think you can shop without people following you and making you really uncomfortable. At the same time, I also think it's important to recognize that when you do go into areas which are, let's say, which have people who are from a different strata of our society, for them to see somebody in a certain kind of attire that they only see in movies and on television is very interesting in real life. It is for them. It is an experience for them. I think they would even look at men. I think they would look at children. I think they would, well, yeah, children, that's a whole other topic. But like, I think more than just the fact that females are supposed to be a certain way, they are genuinely, I don't know if it would be dazzled or like just interested to see what that whole thing is about. Like, oh, I'm looking at someone who's wearing jeans in real life with a t-shirt, and it's not their fault. It's just that they're just a whole other strata of society. For sure, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to do those things. But I think most of us, I think we are not recognizing that jo hamare apne, like, can I speak in Urdu?
Yeah.
Like, if you go to a place where everyone is like us, like if I go with you somewhere, I don't think you would really care what I was wearing, and I wouldn't really care what you were wearing. So I think we do need to take into account that there are different stratas who look at things very differently. And it doesn't just have to do with sexualization of a female. On the other hand, though, you could also argue that someone who's wearing a burqa and shalwar kameez and a dupatta is still getting stared at and is still getting catcalled and is still going to be followed. So, but that comes from a place of like extreme frustration. And where does that frustration come from? That frustration comes from the fact that every single person in the society is so restricted to express themselves, or to, like everything is a taboo. Something that's so natural is a taboo. So what do you expect them to do? Then they do the thing that's most natural to them. They go and they follow their animalistic instinct, you could say, instead of actually being logical about it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And Mishayl, many Pakistani men across all social classes consider that Western clothes are somehow immodest, and this is why they catcall women or they stare at them, because they equate modesty with Eastern dresses, even if the length of the cloth is the same. So how do you perceive this perception of some men?
So basically, this is something that's actually really bothered me a lot, especially when I moved here. Because I remember the first time I went shopping for shalwar kameez or like lawn, or the whole fad. I went shopping and like I got it made, whatever, I wore it, and I realized like it was so see-through that you couldn't actually walk in broad daylight without every single thing being very visible. And at the same time, if I was to change into a normal, basic, jeans and a shirt, I would feel much more comfortable because I'm fully actually covered. This is something that I honestly don't know where it came from, but it is definitely, I think we follow like a very, very weird mindset where anything that's, where an innocent girl is someone who looks and dresses a certain way and not outside that. I think the problem with our mindset is the inability to see something outside of a box. So you box everything, We weren't able to see anything outside, in the sense like you boxed the good girl, or you boxed someone who's modest or religious, and it all had to look a certain way. People didn't know how to overlap them. So they just decided, okay, fine, you know what, let's decide what modesty is. It's wearing shalwar kameez and dupatta on your head, let's say. So then anything outside of that, even if it's a woman who's wearing shalwar kameez with a dupatta in her arm or wherever, she would also be immodest, because it's just easier for people here to classify instead of actually realizing that there is more than just the two dimensions to everything. We weren't able to actually progress with society, with the world, and realize that, you know what, like our Lebanese or Libyans or Iraqis or Iranis or Turkish or any other, or, you know, Moroccans, are none of them Muslim, or is their Islam any less, or is our Islam any more, or are we better, or are we worse? I feel like we just looked at maybe the Saudi way of living and we decided, you know what, that's it, and then anything outside of that was wrong. It's a very it's not, I wouldn't say it's just closed-minded, but I would say it's a very suffocating way to think. And I think that the problem is that men think that religion begins and ends at women. And the day they start actually looking at themselves, maybe we could focus on things that were much more important than the way somebody was dressing.
Yes, Mishayl, that's absolutely right. But these days we just had Aurat March not so long ago, and it's a women's movement for women's rights. So how do you feel about this movement?
So initially, when Aurat March began, I remember I was a little skeptical of it. And I remember thinking, you know what, why are we even doing this? What is this going to do? Where are we going to go with this? You know, what's the conclusion? And like, why should, and like, I really didn't think it would make much of a difference that like 50 to 100 women were going and marching outside. But then I realized that every single table that I would sit at with my male peers or whoever, they were so affected just by these women coming outside and speaking that, you know, that was the conversation that was going on. Like, no matter what was happening, that's what they would drag it to. They would be like, oh, but what do you think about it? You know, you're automatically labeled a feminist because you're already like outspoken or opinionated. They don't really know. And to be honest, why is that a bad label? Like, I feel like, yeah, of course I'm proud to be a feminist. I'm a woman. You know, I stand with my fellow peers. So, but like, I think the men just couldn't handle that women were coming outside and speaking. And then when you would speak to them and you would ask them, like, you know what, why are you so bothered by it? They would say something like, you know, ye mera jism meri marzi kya hota hai? And I think that's when it kind of struck me that, sure, you know, there needs to be a lot more done than just a march. I do think everything has a beginning, and this could be that beginning. But what we need to realize and learn from this is how affected your entire society is, not just men, but like even older women or more religious women, or, you know, just anyone who's against the movement, is by a young female using the word jism. That's what I don't understand. People are so triggered by a female using the word jism because a female that's all that she is to a man. Right? An overly sexualized being. Because if she wasn't an overly sexualized being, then speaking about her own body wouldn't be so immoral. Because that's what it's being seen as. It's being perceived as something that is extremely immoral. That a woman is standing outside in the middle of the road in a t-shirt and jeans saying, it's my body and it's my right to do whatever, you know, I want to do with it. Or like not allow someone to touch it if I don't want to. But a man is unable to actually accept that because they're just like, you know what? No, you're an overly sexualized being and you're not allowed to use the term body because somehow it makes them think of just like one thing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And, you know, this slogan in particular has given rise to many examples of toxic masculinity with the writers like Khalilur Rahman Qamar exploding on television and using extremely derogatory language towards women. But we've also witnessed that such men who display such toxic masculinity get a lot of followers. They're invited by news outlets, they share their views. So how do you think about the coverage of Aurat March and the people who criticize Aurat March? Is it a fair coverage?
I don't know if it's a fair coverage. I think it basically stems from the fact that even though Aurat March probably themselves didn't think it was going to turn into what it did, but then that did give them definitely more motivation, give us more motivation to actually get out there and speak. I think the coverage comes from a place of being extremely threatened, of honestly just women being, you know, open and honest with the world about how difficult everything is for them. And I think it was perceived very incorrectly in the sense that, I mean, this is stuff that guys should be standing with us on, you know. these news outlets are the ones who are giving out news every single day of this girl raped, that girl raped, this girl, murdered, this happening, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 2-month-olds. The news, they're the ones reading this news out, and then at the same time, they're fueling something in the misogynists, in those people who are against it. For what? For more press, or for, more, I don't know, more viewers? I really didn't understand, because it's like, if anything, they should be more sensitive. They should see where it's coming from, considering that they're the ones who are dealing with everyday news of all these horrific incidents happening all around us. And, you've probably heard, I don't think I've ever heard of a girl who hasn't been touched, or hasn't been harassed, or hasn't been walking down the street and been catcalled or made uncomfortable. And even then, and all our guy friends are aware of this, all our, anyone I know who's a male in my company is aware of this, yet most of them were actually against the Aurat March. And these are all people from good families, from open backgrounds. And I think it's because just the fact that they're threatened, and that comes from a subconscious, childhood, indoctrination. Just the fact that that's, they see their mothers in these roles, they see their sisters in these roles, where they're constantly told that a good moral girl is someone who's silent, who doesn't speak up, who hides everything, hides even the injustice that's done to her, and stays home and, takes care of the family. And that's it. So when they see anything outside of that, their brain doesn't really think, why is this happening? Why are these women thinking like this? Why are they on the streets? It just thinks this woman is bad, Whereas I think what men, the press, the journalists, the news, what they need to really do, and women, by the way, who are of older generations, or other families, even educated women around me, they need to see what has caused women to end up on the streets. What happened? What triggered it? And the reality is that it was just frustration, and it was exhaustion of constantly being not allowed to express themselves, not allowed to roam around safely, without a nagging thought in their head. I know, so I'm someone who takes Ubers alone all the time. And I'm constantly, either I have to stay on the phone with somebody so that I can feel safe, or I would usually, I've considered carrying a weapon around, because
Have you ever had a bad experience in Pakistani Uber?
I did one time, but it wasn't like that. It was more of the driver was making me uncomfortable in the sense that I was coming from Rivend, I think, and I was traveling to Gulberg, and it was around 6-7 p.m. and he was just oh, what, we'll travel from the inside streets instead of going from the main road. And I was just no, you have to stay on the main road. And he kept on refusing, so then I got on the phone, and that's when he was okay, I'll stay on the main road. And he did that, but that was the only one experience that I felt very uncomfortable. Otherwise, I think I've had generally not so horrible experience with it. Like I said, most of my interactions in London and here have been the same.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. So, Mishayl, you mentioned a lot of educated men, your friends whom you know and who from good families, but they're still against Aurat March, and they're triggered by the slogan "Mera Jism, Meri
Yeah.
Marzi." So, have you ever thought how you could get at least those educated men on board on the feminist cause? What would it take for those men to believe in feminism?
To be honest, I think no one's going to believe in anything, and you can't force anyone to believe in anything. That's just human nature. The only one thing that I always tell any single person to do, whoever argues with me about it, whoever asks me questions about it, I'm just you know what, don't ask me, don't talk to me, just ask yourself, have you ever done anything that you think is unfair to a woman? Have you ever said anything that you think is unfair to a woman? It starts with questioning yourself. The problem that you have in Pakistan is the God complex that every single man here has. Because we've given them that power, right? In some way. Our mothers gave our fathers that power to be the God of the house, right? And when they did that, what they didn't realize is that they were actually, training their sons to do the same thing, and training their daughters to be just as submissive. So I think the number one problem that a lot of males in Pakistan have is the God complex, where they think that they're the god of the home. And somewhere along the way, our mothers actually gave them that power, which probably came from our grandmothers and so on and so forth. It's generational, definitely. And what they didn't realize was that they were training their sons to do the same thing. They're the god. So when you have indoctrinated in your child, and by the way, I have another theory of why sons think this usually. When you've indoctrinated that in your child, he has no way of actually questioning his own conscience and asking, am I right or am I wrong? Just one simple black and white question. I'm not asking for much more detailed analysis here, And because he is unable to question himself, he is unable to understand anything other than, again, the box that he's created or that he's seen. So how am I supposed to ask someone to believe in something when that person thinks that they can do no wrong? When that person thinks that they can say no wrong? They know that, oh, you know what? And even if I actually get through to one of them, I know 100% that once they are in their marital lives, that's what they're excited to do too. They're not excited for the 50-50. They're not excited to share the burden. They're not excited for the, to help their wives, to be loving, to be affectionate. No. They're excited to now be powerful, to now exercise the power that they learned from their fathers, So I think that for the way change is going to come is through us. The next generation of mothers and fathers. Me as a mother or my peers who may think similar to me, we have to be the ones bringing the change, because we have to indoctrinate in our son's mind that, you are not above another female. Your rights are not above hers. No means no. If she says no, whether she's your sister, whether she's your cousin or your girlfriend or your wife or whatever she is, it's no. And I think a way to exercise that at home is to teach your children to respect each other's no's, And once we can have our sons, once we can train our sons to think and question themselves and actually be groomed differently, we can have a new generation of children, a new generation of parents who don't just throw the burden onto the mother to be the primary carer, and who actually share it in raising children who are emotionally sound and, like they have a conscience. So I think right now the only way to kind of move forward is to not make it so, like, I feel like, I don't know if you noticed actually, but like a lot of the videos that I watched, there was a lot of aggressive interviewing going on between female protesters and males.
Male journalists.
Yes. It was so over the line, They were like shoving mics into their faces. They were like, no, you tell me, like, it was just so aggressive. I mean, how do they not, I want them to look back at those videos and understand, what they're doing wrong. Like, do you not see the tone you're using? Do you not see how you're speaking? And why do you think you have the right to speak to an unknown female that way?
Do you think they're working on an agenda?
I think their agenda was basically to make the Aurat March look super evil, to trigger women into giving evil, dramatic, aggressive reactions, and then demonize them. I think that's what they were trying to do, because anybody who wants to have a normal, sound, logical conversation does not speak that way, does not initiate conversation that way.
Yes, you're right. And we've also seen a lot of black propaganda about the Aurat March with doctored videos of very controversial and potentially blasphemous slogans. So did you see any video like that?
I came across the news. I did not come across any such videos. I did come across the news, and I did see it in a lot of Facebook statuses and a lot of politicians' pages. And the only thing I would have to say about that is that people who are doing this out of hatred, sheer hatred, know that you're doing this, with the hatred towards women only speaking their mind, and know that the consequence of that is detrimental. It is so dangerous to put an allegation like that, which is obviously fake, in a country where, I mean, you can admit it, you can fight it, you can argue it, but most of it is extreme, you're putting a lot of people's life at risk just because you couldn't stand the fact that they wanted to speak up. So what does that make you? How oppressive does that make you? How hateful does that make you? It's vitriol, that's what it is. You're willing for someone else to be killed because your opinion and their opinion didn't match.
Yes, you're right. And this is, I think, what we've seen in the aftermath of Aurat March. So there's a lot of progressively inclined people who are supporting the cause, and they're all for women's rights. But on the other hand, like I said earlier, people like Khalilur Rahman Qamar and other men who display toxic masculinity are getting triggered to the extent that they're making false accusations of blasphemy, which can potentially lead to murders and a lot of bloodshed. So how do you think we can balance this so that it's not a very sensitive issue and we can talk more openly with all sides of the argument?
I think right now, I don't think it's safe to speak about blasphemy or anything to do with that right now, because apparently anything can be labeled as blasphemous. And we have examples like Mashal Khan, who was so young and lost his life to just an allegation which, has never been proven. So I think having conversations like that at the moment would probably, I don't know if it would be possible. I think people should just really realize the consequences of their actions before they go on and make accusations like these. And I think if the law was much stronger, for sure, I think if your legal system could actually protect you from false allegations, that would definitely make a huge difference. But even if, like technically speaking, even if your legal system could protect you from allegations like blasphemy, it can't protect you from extreme criminals. It can't protect you from people who think that they're killing in the name of God. It can't, because those people don't think that these consequences matter. So I think the question to ask right now would be like, is your life worth that risk? Because I don't think it is.
Yes, absolutely. So what can the government do in order to preserve women's rights and promote women's rights? What role can the government play?
I think one of the roles would definitely be dialogue. Everything has to start with dialogue. We have to have an open dialogue between, maybe even female representatives, or maybe we could have these youth clubs which are female led, and have conversations with them, like where are their concerns coming from? Why are they there? Why are they increasing? What can we do to help them? And other than that, I think the most important thing is that we definitely need a committee. I mean, I haven't really done much research on this, but we definitely need a party that would actually be able to define every single thing to protect females. For example, sexual harassment needs a definition that is much more detailed to protect women. I think the laws, even for sexual harassment on roads, has to be defined. I think these are things that really need to be in place. I think these are things that at least need to be discussed. And I think as for opportunity, personally, I mean, maybe I come from a place of privilege, and I say this, that, I've never felt like my opportunity is lesser. I definitely do feel I have the same opportunity, but I don't have the same support system, you could say. I have it in the form of my family, but I wouldn't have it in the form of my peers. And a conversation that needs to be had in that area is also, female versus female hatred. Why is that there? So even, I think the beginning of everything has to be dialogue and definition. Start with dialogue, then define, and then move forward into practical measures to actually make females feel more safe. Whether it's on an Uber, whether it's in their car, in their home, wherever.
So Mishayl, do you think the hatred towards Malala is actually hatred towards women, and it stems from a culture of misogyny?
I don't know if the hatred towards her is a hatred towards women. I don't know, because I can't speak for everybody. But I do know that we are a culture of hatred. I don't think we're a culture of celebration or a culture, I'm sure a lot of people at this point would, bring out like, like those exceptions where people are like, oh, but we celebrated Eid, or, oh, we celebrate this person or that person. But what we need to see around us constantly is, even at a smaller level where people are not famous, you would realize that no one around you is actually supportive that way. Like, personal experiences aside, and, even if you include them, any woman who is trying to make a difference, who is trying to be someone, is initially constantly ridiculed, for even dreaming, for thinking that she's allowed to dream or to think differently. She's shunned, she's not supported, she's not celebrated, not even by her peers, not by her female peers, not by her male peers. I remember I, did a few shoots for this is not coming from a place of bitterness now. Maybe at some point it was, but not now. I did a few shoots for some magazine, some interview kind of thing, and I was really excited about it. But I remember asking a lot of my friends to share it, and I was sharing the news with everyone, but no one was actually supportive. And I've seen that not just with me, but anyone around me who's trying to do something else, that they are not pushed forward. It's constantly, it's just hatred, really. It is just hatred and envy and negativity. You're like, oh, what are you going to do with this? But what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do if you become something? Are you really going to become something? Nobody pushes you forward here. So I think the hatred towards Malala is just Pakistan's culture of hatred. You would see it with everything. You would see it with any new meme that comes up. Even the recent TikTok video, I don't know if you saw the
party over here. Yeah.
Yeah. So even that was met with so much hatred, Or who else was there who was a public figure? And Kandil Baloch was met with hatred.
She was murdered.
She was murdered
by her own brother.
Exactly. Honor killed, whatever. And then the murder was celebrated by so many people around me. That I would see or hear on the streets. I would hear people celebrating that, oh my God, yes, someone's dead, right? Because over here, no one can somehow tolerate people doing things outside of the box. And I think that's why I always tell everyone around me, before you want to go around making change and talk about, gender inequality and talk about all these differences between everyone, can we first start to see an individual as a human being? Can we first start to see that an individual is not two-dimensional, maybe not even three-dimensional. There is so much to one person, so much to their dreams and what they want to do in life. And that amount of negativity that surrounds all these people, can cost them their life, apparently, right? Now, people are going to argue that, oh, if we're speaking about Kandil Baloch, what kind of dream is that she was, she was doing whatever she was doing on a webcam. It's not up for us to decide, right? Whatever she is, she was a human being. Whatever anyone else is they're a human being. And they have the right to do things other than what's inside that, doctor, lawyer, engineer box. It's allowed, And I think we need to really just tell ourselves, what? Even me, I actually end up, being judgmental too sometimes, and I have to stop myself. I have to catch myself and be like, what? You're judging. You're wrong. This person is allowed to dress however she wants. She's allowed to wear too much makeup if she wants to and take it off if she wants to. And she's allowed to, be an actress or a model or be a housewife if she wants to. Why do I get to choose? Because this is the problem as well. You would notice this with this feminism movement. The movement itself, feminism is not the issue. Feminism by definition is not the problem. The problem is how we're exercising it. We suddenly you have to be at extremes. You can't, to be a feminist, you are going to hate on women who are housewives. You're going to hate on women who chose to live at home and take care of their children. They say it's more than 8 full-time jobs, by the way, to be a housewife. And yet you're going to hate on them because they didn't fit your box. So even we are creating new boxes and we're unable to see people outside of them. So first, let's teach ourselves think freely. Once you have the freedom to think, you'll have the freedom to actually see people with more positivity.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And Mishail, in the end, what would you like to say to a Pakistani man who's full of hatred for women and for Aurat March and for women's rights and wants to put them in the box and wants to take control of their lives? What would you like to say to that Pakistani man?
I think it's very difficult to speak to that Pakistani man, actually. But they are all around us, and I think a lot of them are like that, even though they say they're not. And I think the first thing that I say to everyone is, stop thinking. Honestly, how much can you say to them? There's like really nothing you can say. I think I would just say that start by first, I think, yeah, I would sit them down and I would say, you know what? All this hatred and this vitriol that you have towards anyone else, whether it's a female or a male, because this man is also then more likely to hate on weak males or more sensitive males. I would first sit down and speak to them about their childhood traumas, because that's probably where the hatred is coming from. It's coming from a place of abandonment or some kind of physical or mental trauma or abuse or torture. And I would actually ask them to open themselves up to recognizing that trauma. If they're able to do so, and if they're able to heal within, maybe they would be able to see someone else as more than just someone that they can control. And I think even doing that would solve a lot of your problems, because it's not going to take one day or 1 month or 1 year to fix something that's generational. It's going to take many, many more generations, and I just want to be able to tell them that they're allowed to heal and they don't have to hurt others just so that they could feel fulfilled. Because one thing that I think would be interesting for people to know, and they probably do maybe know this already, is that a human being is a creature of habit, right? So if in your childhood a lot of what you saw around you was pain in your family and hurt and fear and sadness, then that is what you would relate love to. So even if you grew up to be someone who was different, once you get married or end up with your own family, subconsciously you would be creating that same environment, because that's the only thing your brain knew. That's the only thing that takes you back into that safe space of habit. Breaking habits is obviously not easy, but if you could just recognize why, the hatred, where is this coming from? Did something happen to make me feel this way? You would be able to actually move forward and break that toxic habit to create a more loving environment and not be afraid of actually feeling emotions the way they're meant to be felt, which is in like all their positivity.
That's very insightful, Mishail. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you so much.